Hey guys, tonight we're going back to ancient China, where clever minds figured out how to create the world's first messaging app, except instead of smartphones, they used birds. And not just any birds, but pigeons that could navigate better than your GPS and deliver messages faster than your internet provider on a bad day. You're probably thinking, how hard could it be to tie a note to a pigeon? Well, you'd be surprised how much goes into creating a communication network that spans thousands of miles and actually works reliably. The Chinese didn't just stumble into this, they engineered an entire system that would make modern tech companies jealous. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how this channel connects people across different time zones, just like those ancient pigeons connected distant cities. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the Han Dynasty, around 206 BCE, standing in the courtyard of a wealthy merchant's compound in Chang'an, the capital city that would later become Lebanon. The morning air carries the scent of incense from nearby temples mixed with the earthy smell of the pigeon loft that dominates one corner of the courtyard. You watch as Master Liu, a grizzled man with weathered hands, carefully selects a particular pigeon from among dozens of cooing birds. This isn't just any pigeon. You notice immediately that this bird has an almost regal bearing, its chest puffed out, its eyes bright and alert, scanning the horizon with what seems like purpose. Master Liu has been breeding these birds for communication for over 20 years, and he can tell you the lineage of each pigeon going back 5 generations. This particular bird, which he calls Swift Wind, has successfully completed over 200 missions between Chang'an and Luoyang, a distance of roughly 300 miles. The concept might seem simple to you at first glance, but as you observe Master Liu's morning routine, you begin to understand the complexity. He's not just feeding birds, he's maintaining a communication network. Each pigeon knows specific routes, has been trained to recognize certain landmarks, and responds to particular signals. The birds aren't just carriers, they're living, breathing components of an information system that rivals anything you might use today. Historians still debate whether the Chinese were the first to use pigeons for long-distance communication, but what's undeniable is that they perfected the art to a degree that wouldn't be matched until the invention of the telegraph. You watch as Master Liu examines Swift Wind's feet, checking for any signs of injury that might affect the bird's performance. In his world, a lame pigeon isn't just an injured animal, it's a broken server in his communication network. As you stand there in the morning light, watching this ancient version of network maintenance, you can't help but appreciate the ingenuity. These people created a messaging system that was faster than any human courier, more reliable than smoke signals, and capable of covering distances that would take weeks to travel on foot. And unlike your modern smartphone, these messengers never needed charging, rarely crashed, and could find their way home even in weather that would ground modern aircraft. But here's where things get mysterious, and this is something that still puzzles scientists today. You're watching Master Liu release Swift Wind into the morning sky, and within seconds, the bird has oriented itself perfectly toward Luoyang, 300 miles away, without a compass, without a map, without any of the tools you'd need to navigate such a distance. The pigeon simply knows. You see, modern scientists have discovered that pigeons possess what can only be described as a biological GPS system that makes your smartphone look like a child's toy. Inside their beaks, these birds have tiny crystals of magnetite, essentially microscopic compasses that can detect the Earth's magnetic field. But that's just the beginning. Their eyes can see polarized light patterns in the sky that are completely invisible to you, creating a kind of celestial roadmap that works even on cloudy days. As you follow Master Liu into his breeding quarters, he explains something that makes your skin crawl a little. These pigeons can also hear infrasound, those low-frequency sound waves that travel for hundreds of miles and are produced by everything from ocean waves to distant mountains. Imagine walking around constantly hearing the voice of landscapes hundreds of miles away. you'd probably go insane, but for pigeons, it's like having a constant GPS signal telling them exactly where they are in relation to their destination. Master Liu shows you a particular breeding pair that he calls his golden birds. These aren't actually golden in color, they're a modest gray-brown, but their offspring have an almost supernatural ability to find their way home. He tells you something that historians still debate: some pigeon bloodlines were so valuable that they were considered state secrets, and stealing a breeding pair could result in execution. You watch as he demonstrates the training process with a young pigeon, maybe 6 months old. The bird has never flown more than a few miles from this courtyard, yet Master Liu is preparing it for what he calls the Great Test. He attaches a small bamboo tube to the bird's leg, so light you can barely feel its weight when he hands it to you, yet sturdy enough to protect a message through storms, predator attacks, and the kind of weather that would keep modern mail services shut down for days. The training begins with something that seems almost absurd to your modern sensibilities. Master Liu walks exactly 1 li, about a third of a mile, from the compound, releases the young pigeon, and times how long it takes to return. The bird is back in less than 3 minutes, landing precisely on its designated perch as if it had been programmed to do so. But here's what Master Liu doesn't tell you yet, and what you won't discover until much later in our story: this seemingly simple exercise is actually the foundation of something far more sophisticated. That young pigeon isn't just learning to fly home, it's building a 3-dimensional mental map of the landscape that will eventually allow it to navigate routes covering thousands of square miles with accuracy that modern GPS systems struggle to match. As the morning progresses, you notice something peculiar about the way Master Liu handles his birds. Each pigeon responds differently to his touch, his voice, even his presence. Some birds immediately calm when he approaches, while others become more alert and focused. He's not just training animals, he's managing individual personalities, each with their own strengths, quirks, and optimal flight conditions. And then Master Liu tells you something that changes everything you thought you knew about this ancient communication system. He leans in close and whispers, "Tomorrow, I will show you the secret that makes our network faster than any human messenger, more reliable than smoke signals, and more secure than you can imagine. But first, you must understand why some messages never reach their destination, and what happens to the pigeons that carry them." The next morning arrives with an unsettling fog that clings to the courtyard like a bad omen, and you begin to understand what Master Liu meant about messages that never reach their destination. You're standing beside him as he examines 3 pigeons that returned overnight, but something is terribly wrong. 2 of the birds are missing tail feathers, 1 has scratches along its back, and all 3 are exhibiting behavior you've never seen before. They're refusing to eat and huddling together in the corner of their cage. Master Liu's expression darkens as he inspects the birds more closely. "Hawks," he mutters, and suddenly you realize that this ancient communication network had the same vulnerabilities as your modern internet, except instead of hackers and viruses, they had to deal with predators that could literally tear their messages out of the sky. You watch as Master Liu carefully removes the message tubes from the traumatized birds. 2 tubes are intact, but the third has been punctured by what are clearly talon marks. The message inside is partially destroyed, readable only in fragments that make no coherent sense. In your world, you might get frustrated by a dropped call or slow internet, but here, a failed message could mean a merchant loses his entire fortune, or worse, a military garrison doesn't receive warning of an incoming attack. The training process, you're learning, isn't just about teaching pigeons to fly home, it's about preparing them to survive a gauntlet of dangers that would make your morning commute look like a peaceful stroll. Master Liu leads you to a section of the compound you haven't seen before, where he keeps what he calls his warrior birds. These pigeons are noticeably different from the others, larger, more muscular, with scars on their wings and beaks that speak of battles fought and won. He selects one of these battle-tested birds, a magnificent specimen he calls Iron Wing, and begins explaining the advanced training regimen. You discover that these pigeons aren't just taught to fly from point A to point B, they're trained to recognize and evade different types of predators, to fly in formations that confuse hawks, and to use weather patterns as both cover and navigation aids. The process begins when the pigeons are barely old enough to fly. Master Liu shows you a training exercise that seems almost military in its precision. Young pigeons are released in groups, with older, experienced birds leading them through increasingly dangerous routes. They learn to recognize the shadow patterns that indicate a hawk circling overhead, the wing beats that signal danger, and the terrain features that offer the best protection during an attack. But here's where the training gets really sophisticated, and slightly disturbing if you think about it too much. Master Liu introduces controlled danger into the training process. He has arrangements with local falconers who will release trained hawks along specific routes, forcing the pigeons to learn evasive maneuvers under real combat conditions. It's like a flight simulator, except the consequences of failure aren't just a crashed program, they are death. You watch as he demonstrates with a group of intermediate trainees. The pigeons are released at dawn, when hawks are most active, and must navigate a route that passes through 3 known hunting territories. The birds that make it through this gauntlet aren't just survivors, they've proven they can deliver messages under the worst possible conditions. Master Liu explains that the mortality rate during advanced training is about 30%, which sounds horrific until you realize that untrained pigeons attempting the same routes have a survival rate of less than 10%. These aren't just birds being trained to carry messages, they're being forged into an elite communication force that can operate in hostile environments. As you observe the training session, you notice something that makes your blood run cold. One of the young pigeons doesn't return with the group. Master Liu checks his timing device, a primitive but accurate water clock, and his face grows grim. After 2 hours past the expected return time, he quietly removes the bird's name from his breeding records. But the story doesn't end there. Because what Master Liu hasn't told you yet is how the Chinese solved the problem of message security in a world where anyone could potentially capture a pigeon and read its contents. Tomorrow, you'll discover the ingenious encryption methods that made these messages more secure than most of your modern text conversations. The next morning brings a revelation that would make modern cybersecurity experts weep with envy. You're sitting cross-legged on a woven mat in Master Liu's private workshop, watching him prepare what appears to be the ancient equivalent of an encrypted message. But this isn't just about codes and ciphers, this is about architecture, engineering, and a level of planning that puts most modern infrastructure projects to shame. Master Liu leads you through a doorway you hadn't noticed before, and suddenly you're standing in what can only be described as the world's first data center. Except instead of humming servers, you're surrounded by the soft cooing of hundreds of pigeons, each housed in precisely engineered compartments that seem to stretch up into the darkness above. The smell hits you immediately, not unpleasant, but distinctly organic, like walking into a living, breathing machine. The structure before you is a masterpiece of ancient engineering that would make modern architects jealous. These aren't just random bird coops thrown together by some enthusiastic pigeon fancier. Each level of this tower serves a specific purpose, with carefully calculated ventilation systems that maintain optimal temperature and humidity levels. You notice that the higher levels are reserved for the most valuable breeding pairs, while the lower levels house the working birds and trainees. Master Liu explains that this particular pigeon tower took 3 years to build and represents the accumulated knowledge of 5 generations of his family. The design incorporates principles that wouldn't be formally recognized by European architects for another 1,000 years. Each compartment is angled to catch the morning sun while providing shade during the hottest part of the day. The walls are thick enough to maintain stable temperatures but thin enough to allow the birds to hear the subtle sound cues they use for navigation. You climb a narrow staircase that spirals up through the center of the tower, and with each level, the sophistication becomes more apparent. The breeding compartments on the upper floors have individually adjustable ventilation slots, feeding systems that can be modified for each bird's specific dietary needs, and even primitive but effective waste management systems that keep the entire structure remarkably clean. But here's what really blows your mind. This tower isn't just a housing facility, it's a communication hub designed with the same principles modern engineers use for server farms. The birds are organized by route specialization, with different sections dedicated to short-range local deliveries, medium-range commercial routes, and long-distance strategic communications. Each section has its own feeding schedule, training regimen, and maintenance protocols. Master Liu shows you a ledger system that tracks each bird's performance with obsessive detail. Flight times, weather conditions, successful deliveries, failed missions, breeding records, health status, everything is documented with the kind of precision that would make a modern database administrator proud. Some pigeons have service records spanning over a decade, with detailed notes about their performance under different conditions. The feeding system alone represents a level of nutritional science that seems almost magical for its time period. Different birds receive different diets based on their assigned routes and current training status. Long-distance flyers get higher fat content to sustain extended flights. Birds recovering from attacks receive special supplements to promote healing. Breeding pairs get nutrition optimized for producing strong offspring. You discover that the tower operates on schedules that rival modern logistics companies. Morning launches for time-critical messages, afternoon departures for routine communications, and evening releases for messages that need to arrive at dawn. The timing isn't arbitrary, it's based on centuries of accumulated knowledge about wind patterns, predator behavior, and optimal flight conditions. As you reach the top of the tower, Master Liu points out features that serve as the ancient equivalent of communication satellites. Strategic perches positioned to give pigeons optimal views of their intended flight paths, wind vanes that help determine the best launch times, and even primitive weather prediction tools that help decide whether conditions are suitable for message delivery. But the most impressive feature isn't visible until Master Liu shows you the tower's secret, a complex system of internal passages that allow birds to move between different sections without being exposed to predators or adverse weather. It's like having a protected network backbone running through the entire facility. Standing at the top of this remarkable structure, looking out over the ancient city sprawling below, you realize you're witnessing something extraordinary. This isn't just a pigeon coop, it's infrastructure. It's the ancient equivalent of a cell tower, a server farm, and a logistics center all rolled into one magnificent structure that has been operating reliably for decades. The morning sun filters through the tower's ingeniously designed windows as Master Liu reveals the true genius of the Chinese messaging system, a code system so sophisticated that it would make modern cryptographers take notes. You're holding a piece of silk no larger than your thumb, covered in what appears to be random brush strokes, but Master Liu's knowing smile suggests this innocent-looking scrap contains secrets that could change the course of empires. You watch as he demonstrates the first layer of security, size constraints that make modern character limits look generous. The message tubes that attach to the pigeon's legs can only hold scrolls of specific dimensions, roughly 2 inches long and half an inch wide when rolled. This isn't a limitation, it's a feature. The size restriction forces messengers to develop an incredibly efficient shorthand that eliminates unnecessary words while preserving critical information. Master Liu shows you examples of messages that pack an astonishing amount of information into these tiny spaces. A merchant's order for silk, tea, and spices from 3 different cities, complete with prices, quantities, and delivery dates, all condensed into symbols that would fit comfortably in a modern tweet. But here's the clever part, even if someone intercepts the message, understanding it requires knowledge of the specific commercial codes used by that particular trading network. The encoding system operates on multiple levels that would impress modern cybersecurity experts. The first level is linguistic. Classical Chinese characters allow for incredible information density, with single symbols representing entire concepts that might require multiple words in other languages. But the real security comes from the second level, contextual codes that vary by route, season, and even individual pigeon. You discover that different pigeon routes use different code variations, so a message intercepted on the Chang'an to Luoyang route would be nearly meaningless to someone familiar only with the codes used on the Beijing to Nanjing route. It's like having different encryption keys for different communication channels, except the keys are cultural knowledge passed down through generations of message handlers. Master Liu demonstrates with a practice message, showing you how the same information can be encoded in 3 different ways depending on the security level required. Standard commercial messages use straightforward abbreviations that prioritize speed and efficiency. Sensitive diplomatic communications employ layered references to classical literature that require extensive education to decode. Military messages use a system so complex that even Master Liu admits he only understands the basics. The writing materials themselves add another layer of security that borders on the paranormal. You watch as Master Liu prepares a message using ink made from a specific mixture of soot, plant extracts, and minerals that create characters visible only under certain lighting conditions. The message appears to be simple commercial correspondence in normal light, but when held at the correct angle to the morning sun, additional characters become visible, revealing the true content. But the most ingenious security feature is psychological rather than technical. Master Liu explains that the Chinese developed a system of deliberately false messages designed to confuse potential interceptors. Dummy messages with incorrect information are sent regularly along all routes, mixed in with genuine communications. Anyone attempting to decode intercepted messages would find themselves drowning in a sea of contradictory information, never knowing which messages contain real intelligence and which are elaborate decoys. The training required to become a message encoder is almost as rigorous as the pigeon training itself. Master Liu shows you scrolls covered with practice exercises, the same message encoded dozens of different ways, each variation designed for different circumstances. Emergency messages that can be written in seconds under extreme stress. Commercial codes that maximize information density for routine business. Diplomatic encodings that maintain plausible deniability if intercepted. You realize that every message handler in this network is essentially a walking encryption device, carrying in their memory the keys to unlock communications across thousands of square miles of territory. The security of the entire system depends not just on the pigeon's ability to avoid capture, but on the message handler's ability to encode information so efficiently and securely that even successful interception yields little useful intelligence. As Master Liu rolls up his practice scrolls, he mentions something that makes your blood run cold. The penalty for betraying the encoding secrets isn't just death, it's the kind of death designed to serve as a warning to others. Because in a world where information truly is power, the people who control the flow of that information hold the keys to kingdoms. As the afternoon shadows lengthen across the courtyard, Master Liu leads you into a part of his compound that feels different, more secretive, more dangerous. The air here carries a tension that makes the hair on your arm stand up, and you're beginning to understand that what you've seen so far is just the surface of something much deeper and more complex than a simple messaging service. You find yourself in a room where the pigeons are different from any you've encountered before. These birds are larger, more alert, and they watch you with an intelligence that seems almost human. Master Liu calls them his imperial flock, and as he speaks, his voice drops to barely above a whisper. These aren't just messenger pigeons, they're the backbone of what amounts to the world's first intelligence network. The hierarchy you're witnessing would make modern corporate structures look simple by comparison. At the top are the golden wing pigeons, birds so valuable that they're personally owned by the emperor and loaned to Master Liu under terms that could cost him his life if violated. These birds carry only the most sensitive state communications, and their routes are known to fewer than a dozen people in the entire empire. Below them are the silver-winged birds, used for military communications and high-level diplomatic messages. Then come the bronze-winged pigeons for important commercial intelligence, followed by several other classifications that Master Liu hints at but won't fully explain. You're starting to realize that you're not just looking at a mail service, you're witnessing the communication backbone of an entire civilization. Master Liu shows you a map that makes your modern understanding of logistics networks look primitive. Red silk threads connect dozens of cities across distances that would take months to travel on foot, each thread representing established pigeon routes with backup contingencies, weather alternatives, and security protocols that have been refined over generations. The complexity rivals modern internet routing systems, except this network was built with living creatures and maintained through pure human ingenuity. But here's where things get disturbing. Master Liu explains that managing this network requires more than just bird handling skills. He opens a ledger that contains detailed intelligence profiles on hundreds of people, merchants, officials, military commanders, even foreign diplomats. The pigeon network isn't just carrying messages, it's gathering information about everyone who uses it. Every message that passes through the system is logged, analyzed, and cross-referenced with other communications. Patterns emerge that reveal trade relationships, political alliances, military movements, and personal secrets that could topple governments. Master Liu and his counterparts across the empire aren't just operating a mail service, they're running a surveillance network that would make modern intelligence agencies jealous. You watch as Master Liu demonstrates the morning intelligence review, where reports from dozens of pigeon stations are compiled into briefings that provide real-time insights into everything happening across thousands of square miles. Grain prices in distant provinces, troop movements along contested borders, diplomatic communications between rival kingdoms, all of it flows through this network of trained birds and carefully positioned human operators. The social structure supporting this system is equally complex. Master Liu explains that pigeon handlers form their own secretive brotherhood, with ranks, initiation rituals, and codes of conduct that bind them more tightly than blood relationships. Betraying the network's secrets isn't just a crime against the state, it's a violation of sacred oaths that bring consequences worse than death. As evening approaches, Master Liu's demeanor becomes increasingly serious. He mentions that tomorrow you'll witness something that few outsiders have ever seen, the selection and training of pigeons destined for the most dangerous and important missions in the Empire. But first, he says, you need to understand what happens when the system fails, and why some message handlers choose death over capture. The shadows in the room seem to deepen as he speaks, and you notice that several of the Imperial pigeons have stopped their usual cooing and are watching you both with an alertness that feels almost ominous. Master Liu notices your discomfort and smiles grimly. Tomorrow, he says, you'll learn why our enemies fear not just our armies, but our birds. And you'll discover the terrible price that must sometimes be paid to keep information flowing in a world where knowledge truly is the difference between life and death. Dawn breaks with an urgency that makes your stomach clench, and you quickly understand why Master Liu's expression has turned grim. Standing in the courtyard are three men you haven't seen before, officials whose silk robes and jade ornaments mark them as representatives of the imperial court. But it's their faces that tell the real story. These are men bearing news that could reshape the political landscape of the entire empire. You watch from a respectful distance as Master Liu receives what appears to be verbal orders, his face growing paler with each whispered word. When the officials depart, he turns to you with an expression that combines excitement and terror in equal measure. Today, he says, you will witness why our network exists. War is coming, and information will determine who lives and who dies. The transformation of the compound is immediate and dramatic. What seemed like a peaceful pigeon breeding facility suddenly reveals itself as a military communication center operating at wartime readiness. You watch as handlers emerge from buildings you didn't even know existed, each carrying equipment and moving with the precision of soldiers executing a well-rehearsed battle plan. Master Liu leads you to observe the selection of pigeons for what he calls the desperate missions. These aren't routine message deliveries, these are flights that will determine the survival of entire cities. The birds chosen for these missions are the elite of the elite, pigeons with service records that read like military honors lists. Each has survived multiple combat encounters, navigated through severe weather, and demonstrated the kind of reliability that makes them worth more than most people's annual income. You're witnessing the ancient equivalent of launching nuclear-capable missiles, except the payload is information and the delivery system is living creatures that can think, adapt, and make life-or-death decisions mid-flight. The preparation ritual is almost ceremonial in its intensity. Each selected pigeon undergoes a final health inspection, receives a specialized high-energy meal, and is fitted with message tubes that have been crafted specifically for maximum survival probability. The messages themselves are prepared with a level of security that goes beyond anything you've seen before. Multiple copies of critical intelligence are prepared and assigned to different pigeons flying different routes, creating redundancy that ensures the information will reach its destination even if individual birds are lost. But here's the terrifying part: some messages are so sensitive that they're prepared with self-destruction mechanisms. If the message tube is opened incorrectly, the contents dissolve into illegible pulp. Master Liu explains the strategic thinking behind what you're witnessing. The approaching enemy army has its own intelligence network, including trained hawks and human interceptors positioned along known pigeon routes. The Chinese response isn't just to send messages, it's to overwhelm the enemy's ability to process intercepted intelligence by flooding their resources with a combination of genuine communications, false information, and decoy flights that serve no purpose except to confuse enemy analysts. You watch as dozens of pigeons are released in carefully timed waves, each wave designed to achieve different strategic objectives. The first wave carries obvious dummy messages intended to be intercepted, containing false information about troop strengths and battle plans. The second wave includes genuine communications mixed with additional decoys, forcing enemy intelligence officers to waste time sorting through contradictory reports. The final wave consists of the most important messages, sent after enemy attention has been diverted by the earlier flights. The coordination required for this operation astounds you. Pigeon handlers across hundreds of miles are executing similar releases at precisely timed intervals, creating a communication blitz that saturates the entire region with airborne messages. It's like watching an ancient version of a coordinated cyber attack, except the weapons are birds and the battlefield spans thousands of square miles. But Master Liu reveals something that makes your blood run cold: this isn't just about sending messages. Some of the pigeons aren't carrying communications at all, they're carrying substances that will poison enemy hawks if the birds are caught and fed to trained predators. The Chinese have weaponized their own communication system, turning it into a tool for eliminating enemy intelligence capabilities. As the morning progresses, reports begin arriving from the field, not through pigeons, but through a network of human observers positioned to track the success of the operation. Some messages are getting through, others are being intercepted, and a few pigeons are simply disappearing, their fate unknown but probably violent. Standing in the courtyard, watching this ancient intelligence war unfold in real time, you realize that what seemed like a quaint historical curiosity is actually one of the most sophisticated information warfare systems ever devised. And Master Liu's expression suggests that the most dangerous part of the operation is yet to come. The afternoon brings news that changes everything, and you're about to witness why the Chinese pigeon network became the backbone of military strategy across the ancient world. A messenger arrives on a lathered horse, bearing intelligence that makes Master Liu's face drain of all color. The enemy has deployed something the Chinese have never encountered before: trained eagles capable of hunting pigeons with devastating efficiency. You watch as Master Liu processes this information with the cold calculation of a general adapting to battlefield conditions. The enemy isn't just intercepting messages anymore, they're systematically destroying the communication network itself. Every pigeon sent out now faces predators specifically trained to hunt messenger birds, and the mortality rate has jumped from manageable losses to catastrophic casualties. The solution Master Liu implements reveals the true genius of the Chinese system and the level of ruthless pragmatism required to maintain it. You're led to a section of the compound you've never seen before, where handlers are preparing what can only be described as suicide missions. These pigeons are being equipped not just with messages, but with explosive devices made from gunpowder, one of China's most closely guarded secrets. The concept is simultaneously brilliant and horrifying. If an enemy eagle attacks one of these specially equipped pigeons, the explosion will eliminate both birds, denying the enemy their trained predator while ensuring the message is destroyed rather than captured. It's the ancient equivalent of a dead man's switch, except the dead man is a pigeon carrying enough explosive to take out anything that tries to stop it. You watch the preparation process with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. The explosive devices are tiny masterpieces of engineering, designed to detonate on impact while being light enough not to impair the pigeon's flight capability. The birds selected for these missions seem to understand their fate. There's something different in their behavior, a calm resignation that makes you wonder if animals can truly comprehend sacrifice. But the psychological warfare aspect goes deeper than just explosive pigeons. Master Liu explains that the Chinese are also releasing birds carrying diseased meat specifically intended to poison enemy eagles and hawks. Any predator that successfully captures and eats one of these pigeons will die within hours, creating a natural selection pressure that teaches surviving predators to avoid messenger birds entirely. The strategic implications are staggering. The enemy's intelligence advantage is being systematically eliminated through what amounts to biological warfare conducted by trained birds. Enemy commanders who were counting on intercepted communications to plan their attacks are suddenly operating blind, while Chinese intelligence continues to flow through increasingly sophisticated countermeasures. You witness the release of what Master Liu calls the Ghost Squadron, pigeons painted with dyes that make them nearly invisible against specific weather conditions and time of day. These birds fly routes timed to coincide with dawn mists and evening shadows, making them almost impossible to spot even by trained predators. The paint isn't just camouflage, it's engineered to wash off during flight, so birds that survive their missions return to normal coloration, preventing enemy spies from identifying the technique. As reports filter in from the field, the effectiveness of these countermeasures becomes apparent. Enemy eagle attacks are decreasing as their trained predators either die from poison bait or learn to avoid messenger pigeons entirely. Communication lines that seemed doomed just hours earlier are suddenly operational again, carrying the intelligence that will determine the outcome of the approaching battle. But Master Liu's expression grows even more serious as he prepares for what he calls the final protocol. You're about to witness something that reveals the ultimate sacrifice built into this communication system, and why message handlers like Master Liu are willing to die rather than let their network fall into enemy hands. The compound begins filling with smoke as handlers start burning records, equipment, and anything else that might provide intelligence to advancing enemy forces. But this isn't just destruction, it's preparation for something far more dramatic. Master Liu leads you toward a building you haven't entered before, where the sound of cooing pigeons mingles with what sounds distinctly like human prayers. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky the color of dried blood, Master Liu turns to you with an expression that combines pride and terrible sadness. Tonight, he says, you will learn why our enemies fear not just our intelligence network, but the people who operate it. And you will discover why some secrets are worth more than life itself. The building Master Liu leads you into feels more like a temple than a military facility, and the realization of what you're witnessing settles over you slowly, like a heavy blanket. This isn't just a pigeon breeding center, it's a sanctuary, a sacred space where history, duty, and quiet devotion intertwine. The air is thick with incense and the echo of whispered prayers passed down through generations. You find yourself among dozens of pigeon handlers, some barely more than boys, others marked by years of quiet service. Each of them carries the weight of an unspoken promise, a solemn understanding that, should the time come, the knowledge they protect must remain sacred, even at great personal cost. The ceremony unfolding before you is as gentle as it is profound. One by one, handlers speak the names of their most trusted birds, recalling journeys that bridged impossible distances and moments where fragile messages carried hope, warning, or salvation. It feels like listening to lullabies from a forgotten age, where loyalty had wings, and silence held the shape of sacrifice. Master Liu explains, with a distant sadness in his voice, that the approaching enemy army includes men trained to uncover secrets through any means necessary. In such moments of danger, the handlers are guided by an unwavering sense of duty, not just to their craft, but to something greater. They carry within them the understanding that some knowledge must be protected at all costs, and that their silence is, above all, a final act of devotion. You watch as the final contingent of pigeons is prepared for release, not to carry messages, but to execute what amounts to a scorched earth protocol. These birds will fly to every pigeon station within a 3-day flight radius, carrying coded instructions that will trigger the systematic destruction of the entire regional network. Within a week, centuries of accumulated knowledge, breeding lines, and infrastructure will be reduced to ash and memory. The strategic thinking behind this devastation is both logical and heartbreaking. The Chinese understand that preserving the network's secrets is more important than preserving the network itself. Knowledge of breeding techniques, training methods, route maps, and encoding systems represents intellectual capital that could be used to rebuild the entire operation from scratch. If that knowledge falls into enemy hands, it could be used to create competing networks that would eliminate China's communication advantage permanently. As the ceremony continues, you begin to understand the full scope of what's being sacrificed. This isn't just about pigeons and messages, it's about the destruction of what amounts to an ancient internet, complete with routing protocols, security systems, data centers, and user networks that span thousands of miles and serve millions of people. Master Liu shows you ledgers that contain the culmination of 5 centuries of accumulated knowledge about pigeon breeding, genetics, training, and behavior. These books represent scientific understanding that won't be matched by European ornithologists for another 1,000 years. Each page contains insights derived from careful observation, experimentation, and documentation that rivals modern research methodologies. But the most devastating loss isn't the birds or even the infrastructure, it's the human expertise. The men in this room represent generations of accumulated knowledge about communication, intelligence gathering, and information warfare. Their deaths will eliminate not just individual skills, but entire lineages of specialized knowledge that have been passed down through families for centuries. You watch as Master Liu performs a final ritual, releasing his most prized breeding pair, the golden birds whose offspring were considered state treasures. The birds circle the compound 3 times before disappearing into the darkening sky, carrying with them genetic lines that took decades to develop and can never be replicated. The psychological impact of witnessing this systematic destruction is overwhelming. These aren't just people preparing to die, they're the guardians of a technological civilization choosing to destroy their own greatest achievement rather than let it be corrupted by enemy use. It's like watching the librarians of Alexandria deciding to burn their own collection rather than let barbarians desecrate the accumulated knowledge of ages. As night falls and the enemy army draws closer, Master Liu gathers the remaining handlers for a final briefing. But what he tells them isn't about battle tactics or escape routes, it's about legacy, and why some knowledge is too dangerous to survive its creators. You're witnessing the birth of cybersecurity, medieval style, as ancient Chinese spy masters develop increasingly sophisticated methods to intercept and manipulate the world's first wireless communication network. Picture yourself as a shadowy figure crouched behind bamboo stalks along a well-traveled pigeon route, armed with nothing but a net, some decoy birds, and centuries of cunning passed down through generations of intelligence operatives. The art of pigeon interception begins with understanding flight patterns, and you quickly realize that these feathered messengers are creatures of habit. They follow predictable routes, much like how your emails travel through specific internet servers today. Chinese spies position themselves at natural bottlenecks, mountain passes, river crossings, and forest clearings where pigeons naturally seek updrafts to conserve energy during long flights. You watch as an experienced interceptor releases a trained hawk at precisely the right moment, causing the message-carrying pigeon to veer off course and land in a predetermined area where Confederates wait with butterfly nets. But here's where it gets deliciously devious. The most skilled operatives don't just steal messages, they read them, forge replies, and send the pigeons on their way with completely fabricated information. You observe a master spy carefully removing a tiny bamboo tube from a captured pigeon's leg, using heated tools to soften the wax seal without breaking it. The original message, written on rice paper no bigger than your thumbnail, discusses troop movements near the northern border. Within minutes, the spy has crafted a nearly identical message with subtle but crucial changes, different numbers, altered dates, reversed directions. It's like someone today intercepting your text messages and changing a meet at Starbucks to meet at the sketchy alley behind Starbucks. The Chinese military quickly realizes their communication system has vulnerabilities, leading to the development of the world's first encryption methods for aerial messaging. You witness scribes developing elaborate code systems where common words are replaced with seemingly innocent references to daily life. The silk merchant's grandmother is visiting might actually mean enemy forces approaching from the west. Historians still debate whether these early cipher systems influenced later Chinese cryptographic traditions, but the parallels to modern encryption are unmistakable. Counterintelligence becomes an art form as both sides escalate their techniques. You see pigeon handlers beginning to use multiple birds carrying identical messages, ensuring that even if one or two are intercepted, the critical information still reaches its destination. It's essentially the ancient equivalent of sending the same email from 3 different accounts. Some handlers go further, sending completely false messages via obviously vulnerable routes while the real intelligence travels through more secure channels, the world's first honeypot operation. The most paranoid commanders develop systems where messages are split across multiple pigeons, each carrying fragments that are meaningless alone but devastating when combined. You watch as a general's aide carefully divides a battle plan into 5 separate pieces, each carried by pigeons flying different routes with different departure times. Even if enemies intercept 4 out of 5 messages, they still can't piece together the complete picture. Modern cybersecurity experts would recognize this as an early form of data fragmentation. Physical security measures become increasingly elaborate as the arms race intensifies. Pigeon lofts start resembling fortresses, with guards posted around the clock and visitors subjected to thorough searches. You observe handlers using specially trained bodyguard birds, aggressive pigeons that accompany message carriers and attack potential interceptors. These feathered security escorts are bred for size and temperament rather than navigation skills, essentially becoming the world's first biological firewalls. The most sophisticated countermeasures involve deception at a massive scale. You witness entire fake pigeon networks being established, complete with dummy lofts, counterfeit messages, and handlers who are actually double agents. Enemy spies waste months intercepting meaningless communications about fictional rice harvests and imaginary merchant caravans, while the real intelligence flows through completely different channels. It's psychological warfare at its finest, designed to exhaust enemy resources and create doubt about which information is legitimate. Some of the most creative security measures border on the absurd. Certain handlers begin using specially trained cats as mobile guards, carrying them in baskets to release near suspected interception points. Others employ drums and gongs to create noise that confuses predatory birds used by enemy forces. You even encounter reports of handlers using mirrors to reflect sunlight and create visual confusion, essentially weaponizing the ancient equivalent of laser pointers against enemy hawks. The technical innovation extends to the messages themselves, with scribes developing disappearing inks made from special plant extracts that fade within hours of exposure to air. You watch as a message that appears to contain mundane information about weather patterns slowly reveals additional text as the decoy ink fades, exposing the real intelligence hidden beneath. It's like having self-destructing messages centuries before Mission Impossible made it cool. Training programs for counterintelligence operatives become increasingly sophisticated, with specialized schools teaching students to identify different pigeon breeds, recognize forged messages, and even mimic the handwriting of enemy scribes. You observe young spies learning to read micro-expressions in pigeon behavior, determining whether a bird has been tampered with based on subtle changes in its flight patterns or landing preferences. The psychological impact of successful interceptions cannot be understated. You witness the aftermath of a major intelligence breach where an entire military campaign fails because intercepted and altered messages led to catastrophic miscommunication. The paranoia that follows transforms pigeon communication from a simple messaging system into a complex web of security protocols, backup plans, and verification procedures that would make modern IT departments weep with recognition. By the time this technological Cold War reaches its peak, the simple act of sending a message has become a multi-layered operation involving code books, timing protocols, route variations, and verification systems. What started as birds carrying notes has evolved into something resembling a primitive version of modern secure communications, complete with all the attendant headaches and security theater that we know so well today. You're about to witness something that would make modern software developers weep with recognition, the world's first major platform updates, complete with user complaints, compatibility issues, and the inevitable "this new version sucks" protests that echo through Chinese courtyards across centuries. Picture yourself as a time-traveling tech support specialist, watching in horror as each dynasty treats the pigeon communication system like their personal operating system, implementing changes that make previous versions completely obsolete. The Tang dynasty kicks things off with what historians call the Golden Age update, and you immediately notice the difference. Where Han dynasty pigeon messages were basically ancient text messages, short, practical, and to the point, Tang operators decide that bigger is better. You watch as they develop larger pigeons capable of carrying multiple scrolls, essentially turning single-purpose messaging birds into flying file servers. The new Tang pigeons are like upgrading from a flip phone to a smartphone, except these smartphones have wings and occasionally get eaten by hawks. But here's where it gets beautifully chaotic. The Tang dynasty introduces standardized message formats that are completely incompatible with existing systems. You observe confused handlers trying to fit old-style bamboo message tubes onto new design leather pouches, like watching someone try to plug a USB-A cable into a USB-C port. The frustration is palpable as veterans grumble about the good old days when messages were simple, while younger handlers embrace innovations like waterproof message containers and standardized route mapping. The Song dynasty takes everything the Tang built and decides to optimize it with the ruthless efficiency of a Silicon Valley startup. You witness the introduction of specialized breeding programs that would make modern genetic engineers jealous, with different pigeon variants designed for specific purposes. There are sprint pigeons for urgent short-distance messages, marathon pigeons for long-haul routes, and heavy-lift pigeons that can carry what amounts to ancient email attachments. It's like watching the development of different internet protocols, except with more bird droppings and significantly higher mortality rates. Song innovations extend to message processing centers that resemble primitive server farms, with rows of clerks sorting, copying, and routing communications based on complex priority systems. You observe the world's first customer service representatives dealing with complaints about delayed messages, lost birds, and compatibility issues between different pigeon breeds. The parallels to modern tech support are uncanny, right down to the standardized responses. Have you tried releasing a different pigeon? Becomes the ancient equivalent of have you tried turning it off and on again? The real game changer comes with Song dynasty encryption updates that make previous security measures look like children's toys. You watch as cryptographers develop multi-layered coding systems where messages are encrypted 3 times using different methods, with decryption keys distributed across separate pigeons flying completely different routes. It's essentially ancient public key cryptography, except the keys have feathers and occasionally need veterinary care. But then the Ming dynasty arrives and decides that everything previous generations built is completely wrong. You witness what can only be described as the world's first hostile takeover of a communication platform, as Ming administrators systematically dismantle Song-era innovations and replace them with their own superior systems. The chaos is magnificent. Imagine if Apple, Google, and Microsoft all tried to update your phone simultaneously while you were using it. Ming dynasty improvements include larger message tubes that can't fit on smaller pigeons, new flight routes that ignore centuries of established patterns, and breeding standards so specific that previous generations of birds become essentially obsolete overnight. You watch veteran handlers desperately trying to retrain birds that have been flying the same routes for years, leading to a period historians diplomatically called transitional communication challenges, but which you recognize as the ancient equivalent of a massive system crash. The bureaucratic nightmare reaches peak absurdity when Ming administrators decide that all pigeon communications must be processed through centralized government offices, effectively turning a decentralized messaging network into a state-controlled communication monopoly. You observe the birth of ancient communication regulations as officials create licensing requirements for pigeon ownership, standardized forms for message authorization, and inspection protocols that transform simple bird-based messaging into a bureaucratic labyrinth that would make modern DMV workers proud. Each dynastic transition brings its own technological upheavals, with new rulers treating the existing communication infrastructure like a hostile foreign platform that must be conquered and rebuilt according to their specifications. You witness the same patterns repeating across centuries: initial enthusiasm for innovation, followed by over-engineering, bureaucratic expansion, user complaints, and ultimately the kind of systematic dysfunction that makes everyone nostalgic for whatever came before. The most fascinating aspect is watching how these updates create unexpected consequences that ripple through Chinese society for generations. Tang Dynasty innovations in long-distance communication enable unprecedented coordination of military campaigns, but also create new vulnerabilities that Song Dynasty enemies learn to exploit. Song Dynasty encryption advances provide better security but require so much specialized training that only elite operators can use the system effectively, creating communication inequality that mirrors modern digital divides. By the time you reach the later Ming Dynasty, the original elegant simplicity of Han Dynasty pigeon messaging has evolved into a complex technological ecosystem with specialized training academies, professional certification programs, and maintenance requirements so demanding that operating a single pigeon route requires a small army of support staff. It's like watching the internet evolve from simple email to the current maze of social media platforms, apps, and security protocols that nobody fully understands but everyone depends on. The irony isn't lost on you as you observe Chinese scholars of each era convinced that their particular innovations represent the pinnacle of communication technology, completely unaware that future dynasties will view their sophisticated systems as quaint historical curiosities. But there's something darker lurking beneath these technological advances, a pattern of increasing centralization and control that transforms simple bird-based messaging into something that would eventually threaten the very freedom it was originally designed to protect. You're standing at the epicenter of history's first great platform war, watching ancient Chinese communication systems duke it out like tech giants fighting for market dominance. Picture yourself as a bewildered consumer trying to choose between competing messaging apps, except these apps have wings, require daily feeding, and occasionally decide to build nests in your competitor's territory. The sheer absurdity of watching grown adults argue about the superiority of different bird-based communication methods would be hilarious if it weren't so eerily familiar to modern tech debates. The drum networks represent the ancient equivalent of broadcast television, loud, impossible to ignore, and capable of reaching massive audiences simultaneously. You observe elaborate drum towers positioned across mountainous terrain, their operators using complex rhythmic patterns to convey everything from weather warnings to military commands. The system works brilliantly for simple messages that need wide distribution, but you quickly realize its limitations when you watch operators trying to communicate complex information. Attempting to describe troop movements through drum beats is like trying to explain quantum physics using only car horns, technically possible, but guaranteed to give everyone headaches. Smoke signals emerge as the Instagram of ancient communication, visually striking, perfect for simple messages, but absolutely useless when weather conditions aren't cooperating. You witness frustrated signalmen desperately trying to create visible smoke columns during rainstorms, achieving nothing but soggy kindling and a lot of colorful language that definitely wouldn't be included in official military reports. The system's dependence on atmospheric conditions makes it unreliable in ways that would drive modern users to rage quit, especially when critical messages disappear into low-hanging clouds or get scattered by unexpected wind patterns. Human runners represent the most reliable but slowest option, functioning essentially as ancient dial-up internet. You watch these remarkable athletes covering impossible distances on foot, carrying detailed written messages that would be impossible to transmit through drums or smoke. But the speed limitations are brutal. What pigeons can accomplish in hours takes human messengers days or weeks. You observe the development of relay systems with runners positioned at regular intervals, creating the world's first packet switching network, except the packets are exhausted humans and the switching points are fortified rest stations stocked with food and medical supplies. The competition between these systems creates fascinating market dynamics that would make modern business analysts salivate. You witness drum network operators attempting to expand their coverage by building taller towers and developing more powerful percussion instruments, essentially engaging in an ancient arms race of volume and reach. Smoke signal practitioners respond by experimenting with different fuel mixtures to create more visible and longer-lasting columns, leading to innovations in ancient combustion chemistry that accidentally advance other fields like metallurgy and medicine. Pigeon-based communication sits in the sweet spot between these extremes, faster than human runners, more reliable than smoke signals, more detailed than drum messages, and capable of point-to-point communication that other systems can't match. You observe savvy military commanders using hybrid approaches, sending initial alerts via drums, detailed instructions via pigeons, and backup confirmation through human messengers. It's like watching someone use email, text messages, and phone calls for the same conversation, except with significantly more bird-related logistics involved. The economics of these competing systems create unexpected alliances and rivalries. You witness drum network operators forming partnerships with pigeon breeders, creating communication packages that combine broadcast alerts with targeted messaging. Meanwhile, traditional human messenger services begin offering premium routes and guaranteed delivery times, essentially inventing ancient express mail services complete with tracking systems and insurance policies for lost or delayed communications. But here's where the competition gets genuinely vicious. Each system's operators begin actively sabotaging their competitors in ways that would make modern corporate espionage specialists proud. You observe smoke signal teams strategically positioning their fires to create visual interference with rival signaling stations, while drum network operators schedule their broadcasts to drown out competitors' messages. Pigeon handlers discover that releasing certain birds near drum towers creates acoustic disruption that confuses the rhythm patterns, leading to the world's first instances of biological jamming technology. The human messenger networks fight back with psychological warfare, spreading rumors about the unreliability of bird-based communication and the health risks of prolonged exposure to drum signals. You watch as these ancient PR campaigns create public debates about communication security that mirror modern discussions about data privacy and platform reliability. Citizens begin expressing preferences for different messaging systems based on perceived prestige, leading to social stratification where wealthy merchants prefer pigeon services while common farmers rely on drum networks. Historians still debate whether this period of intense competition ultimately benefited Chinese society or created unnecessary complexity that hindered effective communication. What's clear is that the rivalry drove rapid innovation across all platforms, with each system developing features specifically designed to outperform competitors. Drum networks introduce coded sequences that provide greater message complexity, smoke signals experiment with colored smoke for enhanced information density, and human messenger services develop specialized training programs that produce runners capable of superhuman endurance and memory retention. The most sophisticated users begin developing integrated communication strategies that leverage the strengths of multiple systems while compensating for individual weaknesses. You observe military commanders who use drums for immediate alerts, pigeons for detailed tactical information, smoke signals for coordination across distant positions, and human messengers for confirmation and follow-up. These multi-platform approaches require enormous resources and coordination, essentially creating the world's first communication IT departments complete with specialists who understand the technical requirements of each system. The competition reaches its peak during major military campaigns when different systems are used simultaneously, creating communication chaos that would be funny if lives weren't hanging in the balance. You witness battles where drum signals contradict pigeon messages, smoke signals are misinterpreted due to atmospheric conditions, and human messengers arrive with information that's already obsolete. The fog of war becomes literally foggy when weather conditions disable multiple communication methods simultaneously, leaving commanders to make critical decisions based on incomplete and potentially contradictory information. Eventually, the market begins to settle as users develop preferences based on practical experience rather than theoretical advantages. But the legacy of this competition shapes Chinese communication culture for centuries, creating expectations for redundancy, speed, and reliability that influence everything from diplomatic protocols to commercial trading practices. You're about to witness the birth of the world's first subscription-based communication service, complete with premium tiers, customer loyalty programs, and pricing models so sophisticated they would make modern telecom executives weep with envy. Picture yourself walking through ancient Chinese marketplaces where pigeon dealers hawk their services with the same aggressive enthusiasm as modern cell phone salespeople, except instead of unlimited data plans, they're offering unlimited flight miles and premium bird insurance packages. The basic economics. Start simple enough. Wealthy merchants and government officials need reliable communication. Pigeon breeders have birds that can provide that service, and money changes hands. But you quickly discover that what begins as straightforward transactions evolves into a complex ecosystem of contracts, service agreements, and pricing structures that would challenge modern business school graduates. The most successful pigeon entrepreneurs aren't just bird breeders, they're essentially running ancient telecommunications companies with all the accompanying business sophistication. Premium service tiers emerge naturally as customers demand better performance and reliability. You observe the development of bronze wing packages offering basic messaging with standard pigeons, silver wing services featuring faster birds with guaranteed delivery times, and golden wing premium options that include encrypted messaging, multiple backup birds, and 24-hour customer support. The parallels to modern internet service packages are uncanny, right down to the complicated pricing structures that somehow make the premium option seem like incredible deals despite costing exponentially more. The rental market becomes particularly fascinating as you watch entrepreneurs develop leasing programs for customers who need occasional rather than regular pigeon services. Traveling merchants can rent birds for specific routes, paying daily rates that include food, housing, and basic veterinary care. It's like ancient Uber for bird-based communication, complete with surge pricing during peak demand periods like harvest season or military conflicts. You even witness the development of loyalty programs where frequent customers earn credits toward free flights and priority booking during busy periods. Breeding operations scale up to meet demand in ways that transform entire regions of China into specialized pigeon production centers. You observe the emergence of massive commercial aviaries that house thousands of birds, with specialized facilities for different breeds and purposes. These operations require enormous capital investments in infrastructure, feed supplies, veterinary services, and skilled labor, creating employment opportunities that support entire communities. The economic ripple effects are substantial. Successful pigeon operations stimulate local economies through demand for construction materials, grain supplies, and supporting services. The insurance industry develops organically as both buyers and sellers seek protection against the inherent risks of bird-based communication. You watch as clever entrepreneurs create policies covering lost birds, message interception, weather delays, and predator attacks. Premium policies even include coverage for acts of war and supernatural interference, reflecting the period's beliefs about spiritual influences on communication success. The actuarial calculations required to price these policies lead to surprisingly sophisticated risk assessment methods that influence other areas of Chinese commerce. Secondary markets emerge as successful pigeon operations generate valuable breeding stock that can be sold to competitors or new market entrants. You observe the development of bird auctions where prize specimens command prices equivalent to modern luxury cars, with bloodline documentation and performance records that rival thoroughbred horse pedigrees. The most successful breeding lines become valuable intellectual property, leading to trade secrets, industrial espionage, and licensing agreements that create additional revenue streams for successful operations. Franchising concepts develop as successful pigeon entrepreneurs expand their operations beyond single locations. You witness the creation of branded pigeon services that maintain consistent quality standards across multiple cities, with standardized training programs, uniform equipment, and coordinated route networks. These early franchise operations require sophisticated management systems to maintain quality control and coordinate logistics across vast distances, essentially creating ancient corporate structures centuries before the concept officially exists. The labor market evolves to support this growing industry with specialized job categories that didn't previously exist. Professional pigeon trainers command high salaries for their expertise in developing birds for specific routes and purposes. Message scribes specialize in creating tiny, precisely written communications that maximize information density while minimizing weight. Route planners analyze geography, weather patterns, and political conditions to optimize flight paths. Even specialized security consultants emerge to help protect valuable birds and sensitive communications from interception or sabotage. Customer service becomes a genuine profession as pigeon services compete for business by offering superior support experiences. You observe the development of customer service protocols that would be familiar to modern call center workers, standardized greeting procedures, complaint resolution processes, and follow-up protocols designed to ensure customer satisfaction. The most successful operations even offer service guarantees with monetary compensation for failed deliveries, creating the ancient equivalent of service-level agreements. Market consolidation begins as successful operations acquire smaller competitors, leading to the emergence of communication conglomerates that control significant portions of regional pigeon traffic. These larger organizations achieve economies of scale that allow them to offer lower prices and better services, but also create concerns about monopolistic practices that would resonate with modern antitrust regulators. You witness the development of exclusive contracts between major pigeon services and government agencies, creating lucrative partnerships that provide stable revenue but potentially limit competition. The most sophisticated operations begin offering integrated services that combine pigeon communication with other logistics needs. Merchant clients can purchase packages that include message delivery, small package transportation, and even limited banking services where trusted pigeon handlers carry currency and valuable documents. These diversified service offerings create customer dependency that goes far beyond simple communication needs, establishing business relationships that can last for generations. Regional variations in pricing and service quality create arbitrage opportunities that clever entrepreneurs exploit by establishing inter-regional pigeon routes that take advantage of price differentials. You observe the development of communication trading networks where messages are bought in regions with low prices and sold in areas with high demand, creating profit margins that support specialized arbitrage operations focused purely on exploiting market inefficiencies. By the time this economic ecosystem reaches maturity, the simple concept of using birds to carry messages has evolved into a complex industry with market dynamics, competitive pressures, and financial structures that rival modern telecommunications companies in their sophistication and complexity. You're about to meet the ancient world's first communication celebrities, pigeons whose legendary exploits would make modern social media influencers weep with envy at their authentic engagement rates and life-or-death content creation. Picture yourself scrolling through an ancient Chinese version of Instagram, except instead of vacation photos and food pics, you're seeing birds whose split-second decisions literally changed the course of history, saved entire cities, and became the subjects of epic poems that people still recite centuries later. The most famous of these feathered celebrities is a bird known simply as a thunderwing, whose exploits during the siege of Kaifeng in 1127 read like something out of an action movie. You witness this remarkable pigeon's impossible flight through enemy arrow storms, carrying desperate pleas for reinforcement that ultimately saved over 100,000 civilian lives. What makes Thunderwing's story particularly incredible is that the bird completed this mission despite taking 3 arrow wounds, essentially becoming the ancient equivalent of a war correspondent who continues filing reports while under direct fire. The pigeon story spreads throughout China, inspiring songs, paintings, and even children's toys modeled after its distinctive black and white plumage pattern. But Thunderwing's fame pales in comparison to Golden Beak, a pigeon whose intelligence reports during the Mongol invasions prevented what historians estimate could have been the complete collapse of Song dynasty defenses. You observe the meticulous documentation of Golden Beak's achievements, over 200 successful missions across enemy territory, carrying intelligence that allowed Chinese forces to anticipate and counter Mongol strategies with unprecedented effectiveness. The bird's handlers kept detailed records of its flights, creating what amounts to ancient performance analytics that track delivery times, route efficiency, and message accuracy with obsessive precision. The economic value of these celebrity pigeons reaches absurd levels that would make modern sports agents jealous. You witness bidding wars between wealthy merchants and military commanders for the services of proven performers, with prices reaching levels equivalent to purchasing entire estates. Jade Talon, famous for never losing a single message during 5 years of active service, commands rental fees so high that using her services becomes a status symbol among the merchant class. Her breeding rights sell for sums that could fund small armies, creating a celebrity genetics market that foreshadows modern approaches to athletic breeding programs. The most heartwarming celebrity story belongs to White Cloud, a pigeon whose loyalty to a particular handler becomes legendary throughout Chinese literature. You watch as this remarkable bird continues attempting to deliver messages to its deceased trainer's home for months after the man's death, refusing to accept new handlers and creating a touching narrative about devotion that transcends species boundaries. The story becomes so popular that White Cloud's image appears on everything from pottery to silk scarves, essentially becoming ancient China's first animal brand ambassador. Some celebrity pigeons achieve fame through their dramatic failures rather than successes, like Storm Chaser, whose habit of flying directly into severe weather systems makes it simultaneously the most unreliable and most entertaining bird in the communication network. You observe crowds gathering to watch Storm Chaser's departure, taking bets on whether the bird will actually reach its destination or get distracted by interesting cloud formations. Despite a success rate hovering around 30%, Storm Chaser becomes beloved for its unpredictable personality and spectacular crash landings, proving that even ancient audiences appreciated entertaining disasters. Military pigeons developed their own celebrity culture with birds like Silent Death, whose ability to navigate enemy territory undetected makes it invaluable for espionage operations. The bird's stealth capabilities become so legendary that enemy forces offer substantial rewards for its capture, essentially putting a bounty on a pigeon like it's a wanted criminal. Silent Death's mystique grows when multiple attempts to intercept it fail spectacularly, including one incident where the bird apparently leads enemy hawks into a canyon trap, resulting in the predator's deaths rather than its own capture. The breeding programs surrounding celebrity pigeons create dynasties that span generations, with offspring of famous birds commanding premium prices based purely on their genetic heritage. You witness the development of detailed genealogical records that track bloodlines with the same precision used for royal families, creating pigeon aristocracy where breeding rights and lineage documentation become valuable commodities. Royal Wing's descendants continue setting performance records 3 generations later, proving that celebrity genetics actually translate into superior capabilities. Celebrity pigeon culture extends beyond individual birds to include their human handlers, who become famous in their own right as the people capable of managing these remarkable animals. Master handler Chen Wei becomes a household name throughout northern China for his ability to train birds for impossible missions, developing techniques so effective that other handlers travel hundreds of miles to study his methods. The relationship between celebrity birds and their handlers creates ancient power couples whose combined reputations influence military strategies and commercial decisions across entire regions. The documentation surrounding these celebrity pigeons creates historical records so detailed that modern researchers can track individual birds' career trajectories with remarkable precision. You discover performance statistics, route maps, success rates, and even personality profiles that read like modern athlete scouting reports. Lightning Strike's documented ability to reduce normal flight times by 40% leads to aerodynamic studies of its wing structure that influence breeding programs for centuries. Some celebrities achieve immortality through tragic endings that cement their legendary status. Phoenix Rising's final mission involves carrying warnings about a massive flood that saves thousands of lives but costs the bird its own when it refuses to abandon its post despite rising waters. The story becomes a cultural touchstone about duty and sacrifice, with Phoenix Rising's image appearing on monuments and government buildings as a symbol of selfless service. The celebrity pigeon phenomenon creates entertainment industries that wouldn't seem out of place in modern times. You observe the development of pigeon racing circuits where celebrity birds compete in exhibitions that draw massive crowds and generate substantial gambling revenue. These events feature commentary, ceremonial presentations, and elaborate pre-race rituals that transform simple bird flights into spectacular entertainment experiences. But perhaps most remarkably, these celebrity pigeons influence military and political decisions at the highest levels of Chinese government, with generals and administrators factoring individual birds' capabilities into strategic planning. The availability of specific celebrity pigeons actually affects the timing of military campaigns and diplomatic initiatives, giving these remarkable animals influence over historical events in ways that seem almost impossible to believe. You're about to enter a world where superstition and technology intertwine so completely that sending a simple message requires consulting fortune tellers, performing elaborate ceremonies, and appeasing spirits that apparently have strong opinions about bird-based communication. Picture yourself watching ancient Chinese handlers treating their pigeon lofts like sacred temples, complete with incense burning, ritual offerings, and prayers that would make modern tech support calls seem refreshingly straightforward by comparison. The spiritual dimension of pigeon communication begins with the widespread belief that these birds serve as messengers between the earthly and divine realms, making them inherently magical creatures whose cooperation cannot be taken for granted. You observe handlers performing daily rituals before releasing birds, including burning specific combinations of herbs that supposedly enhance navigation abilities and protect against spiritual interference. The most common ceremony involves offering rice wine and burning paper money while reciting prayers to Mazu, the sea goddess, whose protection apparently extends to creatures traveling through the aerial equivalent of oceanic vastness. Feng Shui principles heavily influence pigeon loft construction, with masters consulted to ensure optimal spiritual energy flow that will encourage birds to return successfully from their missions. You witness elaborate architectural requirements that specify exact orientations, construction materials, and decorative elements believed necessary for maintaining harmonious relationships between birds and cosmic forces. The most expensive lofts include jade ornaments, carefully positioned mirrors, and water features designed to balance spiritual energies in ways that supposedly improve message delivery success rates by significant percentages. The timing of message releases becomes subject to complex astrological calculations that make modern horoscopes look like elementary school math problems. You observe specialists who dedicate their entire careers to determining optimal departure times based on lunar phases, seasonal transitions, and the alignment of specific constellations believed to influence avian navigation abilities. The most important messages are held for days or weeks until astrological conditions align properly, creating delays that sometimes render the communications obsolete but ensuring they're dispatched under spiritually favorable circumstances. Lucky numbers pervade every aspect of pigeon communication, with handlers refusing to send messages on dates containing unlucky digit combinations or releasing birds in quantities that violate numerological principles. You watch as military commanders adjust their communication schedules to accommodate these beliefs, sometimes delaying critical intelligence reports because sending them on the wrong day might result in spiritual retribution that affects not just the immediate mission but the entire campaign's fortune. The number 8 becomes particularly significant, with handlers convinced that releasing birds in groups of 8 guarantees supernatural protection. Color symbolism extends to both the birds themselves and the materials used for message containers, with different hues believed to attract specific types of spiritual assistance or protection. You observe the development of specialized breeding programs focused not on performance characteristics but on producing birds with plumage patterns considered spiritually auspicious. White pigeons with black wing tips become particularly prized for diplomatic messages, while solid gray birds are preferred for military communications due to beliefs about their connection to warrior spirits. Protective amulets and talismans become standard equipment for message-carrying pigeons, with tiny charms attached to leg bands or message containers to ward off evil influences that might interfere with successful delivery. You witness artisans specializing in creating miniature protective devices specifically designed for avian use, including microscopic Buddhist prayer wheels, Taoist protection symbols, and Confucian virtue reminders that supposedly instill moral behavior in the birds carrying them. The weight of these talismans sometimes exceeds the messages themselves, creating amusing situations where spiritual protection takes priority over communication efficiency. Dietary restrictions based on spiritual beliefs influence pigeon feeding programs in ways that complicate nutrition management significantly. Certain grains are considered spiritually contaminating and avoided completely, while others are believed to enhance supernatural abilities and fed in specific combinations during particular lunar phases. You observe handlers maintaining elaborate feeding schedules that coordinate nutritional requirements with spiritual practices, sometimes resulting in birds whose diet is determined more by religious calendar than biological needs. Dream interpretation becomes a specialized profession within pigeon communication networks, with handlers consulting dream specialists to decode nighttime visions that supposedly predict mission success or failure. You witness the development of detailed dream dictionaries specific to pigeon-related imagery, where seeing birds flying east indicates good fortune while westward flights suggest potential problems. The most superstitious handlers refuse to release birds after experiencing dreams they interpret as spiritually unfavorable, leading to communication delays based entirely on subconscious imagery. Ritual purification ceremonies precede important message missions, with both birds and handlers undergoing elaborate cleansing processes designed to remove spiritual contamination that might interfere with successful communication. You observe handlers fasting for days before critical missions, bathing in specially blessed water, and avoiding activities considered spiritually polluting. The birds themselves are subjected to ceremonial washing with water blessed by Buddhist monks or Taoist priests, creating pre-flight preparation routines that resemble ancient religious ceremonies more than practical logistics. Ancestor worship influences pigeon communication through beliefs that deceased handlers continue to protect and guide their former birds from beyond the grave. You witness elaborate memorial services for departed pigeon masters, with their successors maintaining shrines where they regularly offer food, incense, and prayers requesting continued spiritual assistance. Some handlers claim their birds receive supernatural guidance from deceased trainers, leading to performance improvements that they attribute entirely to ghostly intervention rather than improved techniques. Weather prediction becomes deeply intertwined with spiritual practices as handlers develop elaborate rituals for encouraging favorable atmospheric conditions for important flights. You observe ceremonies involving burning specific combinations of materials believed to influence wind patterns, performing dances that supposedly encourage cloud formations to dissipate, and making offerings to rain gods requesting clear skies during critical message missions. These practices create fascinating intersections between practical meteorology and religious belief. Historians still debate whether these spiritual practices actually influence pigeon communication success rates or simply provided psychological comfort to handlers dealing with the inherent uncertainties of bird-based messaging. What's undeniable is that the integration of religious and technological practices creates a cultural framework where communication success depends as much on spiritual preparation as technical competence, establishing patterns that influence Chinese approaches to technology adoption for centuries. The most elaborate rituals surround the training of new handlers, who must undergo initiation ceremonies that combine practical education with spiritual preparation. You witness months-long apprenticeships where students learn not just bird handling techniques but also the proper prayers, ceremonies, and spiritual practices believed necessary for maintaining harmonious relationships with their avian partners. You're about to discover that ancient Chinese pigeon handlers were essentially running the world's first performance nutrition program, complete with specialized diets, dietary supplements, and feeding schedules so precisely calibrated they would make modern sports nutritionists nod with professional respect. Picture yourself as a bewildered veterinarian watching handlers obsess over bird food with the same intensity that elite athletes focus on their training diets, except these athletes have wings and occasionally decide to ignore their expensive meal plans in favor of random insects they find interesting. The foundation of pigeon nutrition science begins with the recognition that different types of missions require different nutritional preparations, leading to the development of specialized feeding programs that treat diet as a performance-enhancing technology. You observe handlers maintaining detailed records of how various grain combinations affect flight speed, endurance, and navigation accuracy, creating ancient nutritional databases that track correlations between specific foods and measurable performance outcomes. The most successful operations develop proprietary feed mixtures that they guard as carefully as modern companies protect their secret formulas. Sprint missions, short, fast flights requiring maximum speed, demand high-energy diets rich in easily digestible carbohydrates that provide immediate fuel for explosive performance. You witness handlers preparing special pre-flight meals containing specific ratios of millet, wheat, and rice that supposedly optimize glycogen stores for rapid energy release. These sprint diets include timing protocols that specify exactly when birds should eat their final meal before departure, creating feeding schedules that mirror modern athletic nutrition practices with surprising precision. Endurance flights require completely different nutritional strategies focused on sustained energy release and metabolic efficiency over extended periods. You observe the development of complex seed mixtures containing hemp, sunflower seeds, and specially processed grains that provide slow-burning energy sources capable of fueling flights lasting multiple days. These endurance diets include fat-loading protocols where birds consume increased amounts of oil-rich seeds in the weeks leading up to long missions, essentially implementing ancient versions of carbohydrate-loading techniques. The most sophisticated operations develop seasonal feeding programs that adjust nutritional content based on environmental conditions and natural food availability. Summer diets emphasize cooling foods and increased water content to help birds manage heat stress during hot weather flights. Winter programs focus on calorie-dense feeds that provide extra energy for maintaining body temperature during cold weather missions. You witness handlers tracking seasonal performance variations and adjusting their feeding programs accordingly, creating nutritional periodization that anticipates environmental challenges. Medicinal feeding becomes a specialized subset of pigeon nutrition, with handlers incorporating specific herbs and plants believed to enhance various aspects of performance and health. Ginseng root powder is added to feed mixtures for birds undertaking particularly challenging missions, while ginkgo leaves are included for pigeons whose roots require exceptional navigation precision. You observe the development of traditional medicine approaches to avian nutrition that combine empirical observation with ancient medical theories about energy balance and organ function. Quality control in feed production reaches levels of sophistication that would impress modern food safety inspectors, with handlers developing detailed procedures for selecting, storing, and preparing bird food that minimize contamination risks and maximize nutritional value. Grain storage facilities include elaborate ventilation systems, moisture control measures, and pest management protocols that protect feed supplies from degradation. You witness the emergence of professional feed suppliers who specialize in providing premium nutrition products to high-performance pigeon operations. Hydration management becomes equally important as handlers recognize that proper fluid balance significantly affects flight performance and recovery time. Specialized water additives include electrolyte supplements made from sea salt and mineral-rich spring water, while herbal teas containing specific plant extracts are provided for birds recovering from particularly demanding missions. You observe the development of hydration protocols that specify different water treatments for different phases of training and mission cycles. The economics of premium nutrition create market opportunities for specialized suppliers who develop branded feed products targeted at professional pigeon operations. You witness the emergence of feed merchants who promote their products based on performance claims and testimonials from successful handlers, creating ancient marketing strategies that emphasize competitive advantages and customer success stories. The most expensive feed mixtures cost more per pound than many human foods, reflecting the premium placed on optimal nutrition for valuable birds. Breeding nutrition receives special attention as handlers recognize that the dietary health of parent birds directly affects the performance potential of their offspring. Breeding pairs receive enhanced diets containing increased protein levels, specific vitamin supplements, and fertility-enhancing herbs that supposedly improve egg quality and chick development. You observe the development of multi-generational feeding programs that begin during the breeding process and continue through chick development, creating nutritional continuity that optimizes performance potential from birth. Individual dietary customization becomes the ultimate expression of nutritional sophistication, with handlers developing personalized feeding programs based on each bird's unique performance characteristics, health history, and mission requirements. You witness the creation of detailed nutritional profiles that track individual birds' responses to different foods, creating customized diet plans that optimize performance for specific animals. The most successful handlers maintain feeding records that span multiple years, allowing them to identify long-term patterns and adjust nutritional strategies accordingly. Recovery nutrition emerges as handlers recognize that post-mission feeding affects how quickly birds can return to peak performance condition. Specialized recovery diets include easily digestible proteins for muscle repair, anti-inflammatory herbs for reducing exercise-induced stress, and comfort foods that help birds relax after particularly stressful missions. You observe the development of post-flight feeding protocols that begin immediately upon a bird's return and continue through complete recovery. The most advanced operations begin experimenting with performance tracking that correlates specific dietary interventions with measurable improvements in flight capabilities. Handlers conduct primitive but systematic experiments where they test different feeding programs on similar birds flying comparable routes, collecting data that allows them to refine their nutritional approaches based on empirical evidence rather than traditional beliefs alone. Seasonal supplementation becomes increasingly sophisticated as handlers learn to compensate for natural dietary variations that occur throughout the year. Spring diets include detoxifying herbs that help birds cleanse their systems after winter inactivity, while autumn feeding emphasizes building fat reserves for winter survival. You witness the development of year-round nutrition management that treats diet as a dynamic system requiring constant adjustment based on environmental and physiological changes. The integration of nutrition with other aspects of pigeon management creates holistic approaches to performance optimization that consider diet as one component of comprehensive training and care programs, establishing nutritional foundations that support the remarkable achievements of these ancient communication systems. You're about to witness the birth of international diplomacy's most unlikely communication protocol, where state secrets travel via creatures that might get distracted by breadcrumbs and where the fate of kingdoms literally hangs on the navigational skills of birds whose primary concerns involve finding comfortable perches and avoiding cats. Picture yourself as a bewildered foreign ambassador trying to negotiate treaties through a communication system that requires feeding schedules, weather reports, and backup plans for what happens when your diplomatic courier decides to build a nest halfway to its destination. The diplomatic revolution begins when Chinese ambassadors realize that conventional human messengers face insurmountable challenges when conducting sensitive negotiations across vast distances and hostile territories. Traditional diplomatic communications require weeks or months to traverse dangerous routes where bandits, enemy agents, and natural disasters can intercept or destroy critical correspondence. You observe the gradual adoption of pigeon-based diplomacy as embassies discover that birds can traverse political boundaries that would be impossible for human messengers to cross safely. Secret channels emerge as the most valuable application of diplomatic pigeons, creating communication networks that operate completely outside official government channels and provide plausible deniability for sensitive negotiations. You witness the development of elaborate protocols where diplomatic messages are encoded, split across multiple birds flying different routes, and delivered to secure locations where trusted agents can reconstruct and decode the complete communications. These clandestine networks allow diplomats to conduct preliminary negotiations, test policy positions, and exchange intelligence without creating official records that might compromise future diplomatic positions. The establishment of inter-embassy pigeon networks requires unprecedented levels of coordination and trust between diplomatic missions that are often representing competing or hostile interests. You observe the creation of diplomatic protocols that govern shared communication infrastructure, including agreements about feeding costs, veterinary care, and security measures for birds that serve multiple embassies. These arrangements create fascinating situations where diplomatic enemies cooperate to maintain communication systems that benefit all parties involved. Encryption becomes absolutely critical for diplomatic communications as ambassadors recognize that intercepted messages could trigger international incidents or reveal sensitive information about military capabilities, economic conditions, or political instability. You witness the development of sophisticated diplomatic cipher systems where seemingly innocent messages about weather, trade goods, or family news actually contain coded information about treaty negotiations, military movements, or intelligence assessments. The most advanced diplomatic codes require multiple keys held by different officials, ensuring that no single person can decode sensitive communications independently. Cultural sensitivity issues emerge as diplomatic pigeons must navigate complex international boundaries where different nations have varying attitudes toward bird-based communication. Some cultures view pigeons as sacred creatures that must be treated with special reverence, while others consider them ordinary animals or even potential food sources. You observe diplomatic protocols that accommodate these cultural differences, including special handling procedures for birds crossing religious boundaries and backup communication methods for regions where pigeon use is prohibited or restricted. Time zone coordination becomes a significant challenge as diplomatic pigeon networks expand across vast geographical regions where different courts operate on completely different schedules and calendar systems. You witness the development of complex timing protocols that account for seasonal variations in daylight hours, different methods of measuring time, and the varying speeds of birds flying across different terrains and weather conditions. Diplomatic schedules must accommodate not just human political calendars but also the biological rhythms and performance characteristics of the birds carrying critical messages. The most sensitive diplomatic applications involve marriage negotiations, succession planning, and territorial disputes where miscommunication could literally trigger wars or dynastic crises. You observe the development of ultra-secure diplomatic protocols that use multiple layers of verification, including backup birds carrying confirmation messages, coded responses that verify message authenticity, and elaborate authentication procedures that ensure messages actually originate from authorized diplomatic sources rather than enemy agents attempting to manipulate negotiations. Economic diplomacy benefits enormously from pigeon communication as trade negotiations can proceed at speeds that were previously impossible using traditional messenger systems. You witness the emergence of commercial diplomatic networks where merchant ambassadors coordinate complex international trade agreements, currency exchanges, and resource negotiations using bird-based communication that allows rapid responses to changing market conditions. These commercial diplomatic channels create economic integration that transcends political boundaries and creates vested interests in maintaining peaceful relations. Intelligence sharing through diplomatic pigeon networks creates informal alliance systems that operate independently of official political relationships. You observe the development of intelligence sharing protocols where allied diplomatic missions exchange information about military movements, political developments, and potential threats using communication channels that provide plausible deniability if the information sharing is discovered by hostile forces. These intelligence networks create informal diplomatic coalitions that influence international relations in ways that aren't reflected in official treaties or agreements. Crisis management becomes dramatically more effective as diplomatic missions can coordinate responses to rapidly developing situations using communication speeds that were previously impossible. You witness diplomatic responses to natural disasters, military conflicts, and political upheavals that unfold over days rather than months, allowing international diplomacy to respond to events while they're still developing rather than reacting to historical facts. This communication speed transforms the fundamental nature of international relations from reactive to proactive. Protocol development for diplomatic pigeon use requires addressing unprecedented questions about international law, territorial sovereignty, and diplomatic immunity that have no historical precedents. You observe the creation of international agreements that govern the rights of diplomatic birds to cross territorial boundaries, the status of pigeon handlers as diplomatic personnel, and the legal protections for bird-based communication systems. These protocols establish legal frameworks that recognize the unique requirements of avian diplomacy. The most sophisticated diplomatic operations begin using pigeon communication for real-time treaty negotiations where multiple parties can exchange proposals, counter-proposals, and modifications rapidly enough to maintain negotiating momentum. You witness diplomatic conferences where negotiators can consult with their home governments and receive updated instructions within days rather than months, allowing complex multilateral negotiations to reach conclusions in timeframes that would have been impossible using traditional communication methods. Cultural exchange programs emerge as diplomatic missions recognize that pigeon networks can facilitate communication between scholars, artists, and intellectuals across international boundaries. You observe the development of unofficial diplomatic channels that promote cultural understanding and intellectual exchange independently of official political relationships, creating people-to-people connections that often survive political conflicts and contribute to long-term diplomatic stability. The legacy of diplomatic pigeon communication establishes precedents for international cooperation, communication security, and crisis management that influence diplomatic practices for centuries after the birds themselves become obsolete, creating institutional knowledge about international communication that shapes modern diplomatic protocols in ways that most contemporary diplomats never realize. You're witnessing the technological equivalent of watching your grandfather's flip phone get slowly replaced by smartphones, except instead of gentle obsolescence, you're watching a communication system that dominated human civilization for over 1,000 years get brutally murdered by copper wires and electrical signals. Picture yourself as a pigeon handler desperately trying to explain to potential customers why bird-based messaging is still relevant while telegraph operators next door are sending messages across continents in minutes rather than days, creating the ancient world's first devastating case of technological disruption. The telegraph's arrival in China during the mid-19th century creates immediate panic among pigeon communication networks as handlers realize they're facing an existential threat that makes their centuries-old profession suddenly obsolete. You observe the desperate attempts of established pigeon operations to compete with electrical communication by emphasizing advantages that telegraphs can't match: privacy, mobility, and independence from fixed infrastructure. But these arguments sound increasingly hollow as telegraph networks expand rapidly and demonstrate reliability that even the best-trained pigeons can't consistently match. The speed differential becomes impossible to ignore as telegraph messages traverse distances in hours that require days or weeks for even the fastest pigeons to cover. You witness the psychological impact on pigeon handlers who watch their professional expertise become irrelevant almost overnight, as customers abandon services that their families have used for generations in favor of nearly instantaneous electrical communication. The most established pigeon operations begin offering desperate discounts and premium services, but competing against speed-of-light communication using animals that fly at 50 miles per hour proves to be a hopeless endeavor. Economic collapse hits pigeon communication networks with devastating speed as commercial customers abandon bird-based messaging for telegraph services that offer superior speed, reliability, and cost-effectiveness. You observe the rapid devaluation of pigeon breeding stock as birds that previously commanded premium prices become essentially worthless overnight. Specialized facilities that housed thousands of birds become financial liabilities rather than assets, with operators unable to sell properties that were designed for a suddenly obsolete technology. Government contracts provide temporary lifelines for some pigeon operations as military and administrative agencies recognize that telegraph networks remain vulnerable to sabotage and technical failures that don't affect bird-based communication. You witness the development of hybrid communication strategies where telegraphs handle routine traffic while pigeons provide backup capabilities for critical communications. However, these government contracts represent a small fraction of the commercial market that previously supported the pigeon communication industry. Technological adaptation attempts emerge as desperate pigeon handlers try to integrate their services with telegraph networks, offering last-mile delivery for telegraph messages to locations not served by electrical infrastructure. You observe creative business models where pigeon operators position themselves as complementary services rather than competitors, handling message delivery to remote areas where telegraph lines haven't been installed. These adaptation efforts provide temporary survival strategies but can't compensate for the fundamental technological superiority of electrical communication. The social impact extends beyond pure economics as entire communities that built their prosperity around pigeon communication face sudden unemployment and economic devastation. You witness the collapse of supporting industries including specialized grain suppliers, veterinary services, and equipment manufacturers whose livelihoods depended on the pigeon communication ecosystem. The social disruption resembles modern situations where entire industries disappear due to technological change, leaving workers with skills that are no longer economically valuable. Cultural resistance movements emerge as traditionalists argue that pigeon communication represents important cultural values that shouldn't be abandoned for foreign technological innovations. You observe passionate debates about cultural authenticity, technological independence, and the spiritual dimensions of human-animal cooperation that electric wires can never replicate. These cultural arguments create emotional attachment to pigeon communication that persists long after its practical advantages disappear. Niche market survival becomes the only viable strategy for remaining pigeon operators who identify specialized applications where birds retain advantages over telegraph systems. military applications in areas without telegraph infrastructure, covert operations where electrical communication poses security risks, and ceremonial uses that emphasize tradition over efficiency provide limited market opportunities. You witness the transformation of pigeon communication from a mass-market service into a specialized niche industry serving specific customer needs. Innovation desperation drives final attempts to enhance pigeon communication capabilities through technological improvements that might allow competition with telegraph systems. You observe experiments with multiple bird redundancy systems, improved training techniques, and hybrid approaches that combine traditional pigeon handling with modern navigational aids. These innovations demonstrate impressive creativity but cannot overcome the fundamental speed and reliability advantages of electrical communication. The emotional dimension of technological transition becomes apparent as handlers who dedicated their entire careers to mastering pigeon communication struggle with the psychological impact of watching their life's work become irrelevant. You witness the personal stories of master handlers who achieved remarkable expertise in a field that suddenly has no economic value, creating human drama that accompanies major technological transitions throughout history. Generational conflict emerges as younger handlers more readily abandon pigeon communication for opportunities in telegraph operations, while older practitioners resist accepting that their traditional skills have become obsolete. You observe family businesses torn apart by disagreements about whether to continue investing in pigeon operations or transition to new technologies, creating personal conflicts that reflect broader social tensions about technological change. International variations in telegraph adoption create temporary geographic advantages for pigeon communication in regions where electrical infrastructure development lags behind the technology's availability. You witness the gradual retreat of pigeon communication to increasingly remote areas where telegraph installation remains economically unfeasible, creating a pattern of technological displacement that moves from urban centers to rural peripheries. The final phase of decline accelerates as telegraph networks achieve comprehensive coverage that eliminates even niche advantages for pigeon communication. You observe the last commercial pigeon operations closing their doors as even specialized military and covert applications transition to electrical communication systems that offer superior security and reliability for sensitive communications. Historical documentation of this transition provides detailed records of how technological disruption affects established industries, creating case studies that illuminate patterns of innovation, resistance, adaptation, and ultimate obsolescence that characterize major technological transitions throughout human history. The end comes not with dramatic collapse but with gradual abandonment as each customer makes individual decisions to switch to superior technology, leaving pigeon handlers with empty lofts and obsolete expertise that once commanded respect and substantial income. You're about to discover how a communication system based on flying rats somehow became deeply embedded in Chinese cultural DNA, influencing everything from poetry and painting to philosophical metaphors and children's bedtime stories in ways that persist centuries after the last commercial pigeon message was delivered. Picture yourself wandering through modern Chinese cultural landscapes where references to pigeon communication appear in contexts so unexpected and diverse that you begin to realize these birds didn't just carry messages, they carried meaning, symbolism, and cultural significance that transcended their practical transportation function. Literature becomes the primary vehicle for preserving pigeon communication culture as poets and writers transform mundane logistical realities into powerful metaphors for human connection, loyalty, and the triumph of determination over impossible odds. You witness the emergence of classical poems where pigeon flights represent spiritual journeys, romantic dedication, and the persistence required to maintain relationships across vast distances. The most famous works use pigeon imagery to explore themes of separation and reunion that resonate with audiences who may never have seen an actual messenger bird but understand the emotional symbolism instantly. Artistic representations evolve from practical documentation to sophisticated aesthetic expressions that use pigeon imagery to convey complex cultural values about communication, loyalty, and the relationship between humans and nature. You observe the development of painting traditions where pigeons symbolize faithfulness, with artists creating increasingly stylized representations that emphasize the bird's symbolic rather than literal significance. These artistic traditions influence decorative arts, architecture, and even landscape design where pigeon motifs appear in contexts completely removed from their original communication function. Folk tales and legends proliferate around famous pigeon stories, with historical accounts transformed into mythological narratives that emphasize moral lessons rather than factual accuracy. You witness the creation of stories where pigeons possess supernatural abilities, communicate directly with spirits, and perform miraculous feats that would be impossible for actual birds. These folk traditions preserve cultural memory of pigeon communication while adapting it for entertainment and moral instruction, creating narratives that survive in oral tradition long after their historical context becomes obsolete. Philosophical applications emerge as Chinese thinkers use pigeon communication as metaphors for exploring concepts about duty, sacrifice, and the relationship between individual action and collective benefit. You observe scholarly works that analyze pigeon behavior as examples of natural virtue, using observations about bird loyalty and determination to support arguments about human ethics and social responsibility. These philosophical applications transform practical animal behavior into abstract moral principles that influence Chinese ethical thinking for generations. Ceremonial traditions develop around pigeon symbolism in contexts that have nothing to do with actual communication, including wedding rituals where releasing pigeons represents the couple's hopes for faithful communication throughout their marriage. You witness the evolution of ceremonial practices that use pigeon imagery and symbolism to reinforce cultural values about loyalty, dedication, and the importance of maintaining connections across time and distance. These ceremonies preserve cultural associations with pigeon communication while adapting them for contemporary social functions. Children's culture embraces pigeon imagery through toys, games, and educational materials that introduce young people to cultural values associated with pigeon communication without requiring direct experience with the historical practice. You observe the development of children's songs, stories, and games that use pigeon themes to teach lessons about responsibility, perseverance, and the importance of completing tasks despite obstacles. These cultural products ensure that pigeon communication symbolism continues influencing new generations long after its practical applications disappear. Religious and spiritual interpretations incorporate pigeon symbolism into Buddhist and Taoist teachings about communication between earthly and divine realms, with birds representing messengers that carry prayers and spiritual communications across metaphysical boundaries. You witness the integration of pigeon imagery into religious art, architecture, and ritual practices that emphasize spiritual rather than practical communication, creating sacred associations that preserve cultural significance in contexts completely removed from historical messaging applications. Linguistic influences appear throughout Chinese language development as idioms, expressions, and metaphorical language incorporate references to pigeon communication that continue being used long after their literal meanings become obscure. You observe the persistence of phrases that reference pigeon behavior, training, and messaging in contexts that have nothing to do with birds, creating linguistic artifacts that preserve cultural memory through everyday speech patterns that most speakers don't consciously connect to historical communication practices. Cultural identity formation incorporates pigeon communication into narratives about Chinese technological innovation and cultural sophistication that distinguish Chinese civilization from other cultures. You witness the development of cultural pride around pigeon communication as evidence of ancient Chinese ingenuity and organizational capability, creating identity narratives that use historical communication achievements to support contemporary cultural confidence and national pride. Educational traditions preserve knowledge about pigeon communication through scholarly studies that analyze the historical system as an example of pre-modern technological achievement worthy of respect and study. You observe the integration of pigeon communication history into educational curricula that teach students about traditional Chinese technology, social organization, and cultural values, ensuring that knowledge about the historical system continues being transmitted even when its practical applications are completely obsolete. Commercial applications adapt pigeon symbolism for marketing and branding purposes in contexts that exploit cultural associations with loyalty, reliability, and traditional values to promote contemporary products and services. You witness businesses using pigeon imagery and references to historical communication practices in advertising campaigns that appeal to cultural nostalgia and traditional values, creating commercial applications that preserve cultural significance while completely divorcing it from historical context. Regional variations develop as different areas of China emphasize different aspects of pigeon communication culture based on local historical experiences and cultural priorities. You observe geographic differences in how pigeon symbolism is interpreted and applied, with regions that had extensive historical pigeon operations maintaining different cultural associations than areas where the communication system was less prominent, creating cultural diversity that reflects varied historical experiences with the technology. Modern adaptations appear in contemporary Chinese culture through references in film, television, literature, and popular entertainment that use pigeon communication imagery to explore contemporary themes about communication, technology, and human relationships. You witness creative works that draw parallels between historical pigeon communication and modern digital communication, using historical practices as metaphors for examining contemporary social and technological issues. The persistence of pigeon communication in Chinese cultural consciousness demonstrates how technological practices can transcend their immediate practical applications to become integrated into cultural identity, artistic expression, and social values in ways that ensure their symbolic significance survives long after their functional relevance disappears, creating cultural legacies that influence societies for centuries after the original technologies become completely obsolete. As you settle deeper into your pillow tonight, consider this: the Chinese pigeon mail system you've been following through these past hours wasn't just an ancient curiosity, it was humanity's first glimpse into the connected world you now take for granted. Every time you send a WhatsApp message, post on Instagram, or fire off a tweet, you're participating in the same fundamental human drive that led those Tang Dynasty engineers to strap tiny scrolls to pigeon legs over 1,000 years ago. The parallels are almost eerily precise when you think about it. Those imperial pigeon lofts scattered across China functioned exactly like today's server farms, massive infrastructure investments designed to keep information flowing smoothly across vast distances. The pigeon trainers who spent months conditioning their birds to recognize specific routes were essentially the world's first network administrators, troubleshooting connection issues and optimizing data transmission speeds. When a pigeon failed to deliver its message, it was the medieval equivalent of your Wi-Fi going down right before an important video call. You've probably never considered that your smartphone's contact list has ancient Chinese precedent, but it does. Those carefully maintained breeding records and pigeon genealogies serve the same purpose as your phone's address book, organizing communication channels by reliability, speed, and specialization. Premium messenger pigeons, bred for speed and endurance, were like having unlimited data plans, while common carrier pigeons functioned more like basic messaging services with limited range and capacity. Even the social hierarchies translate perfectly. Just as today's social media platforms have verified accounts, premium subscribers, and regular users, the Chinese pigeon mail system had its own tiers of service. Imperial messages rode with the fastest, most reliable birds. Think verified blue checkmarks with priority delivery. Military communications used battle-tested veterans with proven track records, while civilian merchants made do with standard-grade pigeons that got the job done without the premium features. The security concerns mirror modern cybersecurity challenges in ways that would make contemporary IT professionals nod in recognition. Those ancient Chinese cryptographers developing coded message systems were essentially creating the first encrypted communications, just as today's end-to-end encryption protects your private messages from prying eyes. The elaborate counter-espionage measures, decoy pigeons, false messages, and protected flight paths were sophisticated firewalls and VPNs centuries before anyone dreamed of the internet. Historians still debate whether the Chinese fully understood they were creating humanity's first social network, but the evidence suggests they did. The integration of commercial, military, diplomatic, and personal messaging into a single unified system demonstrates remarkable foresight. They built redundancy into their networks, established maintenance protocols, and even developed customer service procedures for when pigeons went missing or messages arrived damaged. What's particularly fascinating is how the psychological aspects of communication remained unchanged across centuries. Ancient Chinese merchants experienced the same anxiety waiting for important business replies that you feel when someone leaves you on read. Military commanders checking their pigeon lofts for urgent battle updates showed the same compulsive behavior you display checking your phone notifications. The human need for instant gratification in communication hasn't evolved much, only the delivery mechanisms have improved. The economic models translate surprisingly well too. Those professional pigeon breeders charging premium rates for guaranteed delivery services pioneered the subscription-based communication economy. They offered different service tiers, maintained customer loyalty through reliability, and even provided technical support when communications failed. Sound familiar? It's the same business model powering every major tech company today. Perhaps most remarkably, the Chinese pigeon mail system faced the same fundamental challenge that modern social media platforms grapple with, balancing speed, accuracy, and scale. They discovered that making communication faster and more accessible inevitably increased the volume of trivial messages alongside truly important ones. Medieval Chinese officials complained about information overload in ways that would resonate perfectly with anyone trying to manage multiple group chats while staying on top of work emails. The cultural impact follows similar patterns as well. Just as social media has created new forms of literature, art, and social interaction, pigeon mail influenced Chinese poetry, painting, and philosophical thought for centuries. Ancient writers used pigeon metaphors to explore themes of longing, connection, and separation that remain central to how we think about communication today. The romantic tradition of love letters carried by specially trained doves directly parallels modern couples maintaining long-distance relationships through video calls and constant messaging. Even the eventual obsolescence of pigeon mail offers lessons for our digital age. The system didn't disappear overnight when telegraphs arrived. It gradually became specialized, serving niche markets and traditional purposes while newer technologies handled mainstream communication. This mirrors how traditional media adapted to the internet age, finding new roles rather than simply vanishing. The Chinese understood something profound about human nature. We are fundamentally social creatures who will go to extraordinary lengths to stay connected with each other. Whether training birds to carry messages across mountain ranges or developing algorithms to deliver digital content across fiber optic cables, the underlying motivation remains identical. We want to share our thoughts, coordinate our activities, and maintain our relationships regardless of physical distance. As tonight's journey through ancient Chinese communication technology comes to a gentle close, let yourself appreciate the remarkable continuity of human innovation. Those patient pigeon trainers working in medieval Chinese lofts were your technological ancestors, solving the same problems you encounter daily with the tools available to them. They created something beautiful and functional that served humanity for over 1,000 years, a testament to ingenuity that makes your smartphone seem almost mundane by comparison. Now, as your breathing begins to slow and your thoughts drift toward sleep, imagine yourself as one of those ancient Chinese engineers, watching a perfectly trained pigeon disappear into the sunset, carrying an important message toward its destination. Feel the satisfaction of having contributed to humanity's eternal quest to stay connected, to share information, to reach across distances and touch other lives with words and ideas. Let that image settle into your mind, the pigeon's wings catching the last golden light of day, the knowledge that somewhere, someone is waiting for the message it carries, the quiet pride of having mastered an elegant solution to a timeless human need. In this peaceful moment between waking and sleep, you're connected to every person throughout history who has ever sent a message hoping for a reply, who has ever looked up at the sky wondering if their words have reached their intended destination. The gentle rhythm of wings beating through ancient Chinese skies merges with the soft hum of your modern world, air conditioning, distant traffic, the subtle electronic whisper of devices charging nearby. Past and present blend together in the comfortable darkness of your bedroom, where time moves differently and the urgent demands of constant communication fade into the background. Here, in this quiet sanctuary, you can finally rest knowing that the messages that truly matter will always find their way to where they belong, just as they have for countless generations before you. Sleep well, knowing that you're part of humanity's beautiful, endless conversation that began with trained pigeons and continues with every gentle breath you take as you drift peacefully into dreams.